Good morning, and thank you very much. Sebastian, thank you for your kind words and for your hospitality. Ignacio as well, thank you very much for helping me get acclimated here yesterday and today. So thank you very much for your hospitality. And thank you for you attending today to this conference on this important topic. What I'd like to do is to thank you as a jurisdiction in terms of what you've done around the world. If I could have the next slide, please. There we go. You've actually done a tremendous job here, not only in Spain, but around the world. In Spain, there's a number of regulators who've already adopted XBRL, such as the security supervisor, the central bank, registry's house, and a bunch of the local jurisdiction activities. And so you see the impact of that in the marketplace. Additionally, though, you've had an impact outside of Spain with the founding of the XBRL EU initiative, an organization to facilitate the interaction of all the countries in the EU with the Commission. And this is having increasing impact and influence with not only the banking regulators, but with the security regulators, and hopefully eventually with the insurance and pension regulators as well. So the leadership that you've shown here in Spain is more so than just developing the market in Spain. It's actually facilitating the adoption of XBRL, not only in Spain, but in the European Union, and also in other countries around the world. The leadership here in Spain is extended to the Latin American countries in developing jurisdictions in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and other Latin American countries. XBRL Spain is one of the leading, if not the leading, jurisdiction in the world. As Sebastian mentioned earlier, there are more instance documents in Spain than in any other country in the world. So at this point in time, your leadership is a shining example to other countries around the world because of what you've done here. And I'd like to start off by saying thank you very much for your leadership and your efforts here in Spain. It's really pretty interesting to watch that activity and how much work you've done and the results of it to your local marketplace. As we move forward, this slide here is really one that talks about the idea of the business reporting supply chain. The processes that are relevant in the supply chain, from internal operations all the way through to economic policy making on the far right. Any XBRL presentation wouldn't be complete without the business reporting supply chain. So I'll start with that just to get it out of the way. But what I'd like to point out is that in many cases, the idea of XBRL is defined by producers giving XBRL information to consumers. And it's typically defined by many as an idea of external reporting. And so it's applicable at this location in the supply chain. Well, that's true and that's very useful, but XBRL is the standard for the entire supply chain. So I'd like us to think about the idea of XBRL beyond just external reporting, because producers and consumers exist at all locations of the supply chain. It's not just about external reporting. It actually can be applied to many, many other types of reporting, not only within the organization, but also across organizations that are external to the enterprise. I'm going to give you some examples of that in a minute, but I'd like to ask you this question. What other producers and consumers do you see in your organization, in your supply chain, and in the way that your enterprise interacts with others? Are there other opportunities that I have not outlined here? Or are there opportunities I've outlined here that you see that you could take advantage of? Additionally, there's one more there at the bottom. Where is there a need for more transparency and less friction? That's an easy way for you to identify opportunities for XBRL and the standardization idea. The easy phrase that I often hear people talk about is pain. Wherever there is pain, friction, wherever there's opacity, then there's an opportunity for standardization to improve the business process. And so, as we'll see in just a second, there's more opportunities for us to use the standard than just simply an external reporting. If I take this same slide and start to show you some of the taxonomies that exist today, we have financial taxonomies, we have taxonomies for corporate social responsibility, and others. The primary benefit is to create transparency of the information so that people can more easily reuse and analyze the information. So with the financial taxonomies, transparency and analysis are an obvious benefit. But there are other taxonomies. There are non-financial taxonomies. There are corporate social responsibility taxonomies with the Global Reporting Initiative and others. There are taxonomies for corporate actions, which would be very important if you're a bank or a creditor and looking at debt covenant activities. So corporate actions are kind of a new area, a new taxonomy in which it would provide significant benefit to anyone looking to track or monitor corporate activities. We also have a taxonomy for the microfinance exchange. This taxonomy has been leveraged by this very small, low-end creditor that allows very small dollar amounts to be loaned to impact areas of our marketplace that previously could not be accessed because the cost of lending was too high. I spoke at a conference in India earlier last year, and the impact of the microfinance exchange allowed lending to take place in very rural parts of that country that could previously not have been accessed by the capital markets. In one particular instance, a community of farmers, of agricultural individuals, whose children had no ability to attain advanced education because their economic status did not allow them to send their children to school. So they were sort of locked into an economic environment that left no opportunity for advancement. Well, the microfinance exchange allowed them to borrow money to buy sewing machines for some of the individuals in that local community. Those sewing machines allowed them to manufacture ties and to sell those ties at an amount that allowed them to send their children to school, breaking an economic cycle that allowed them to advance their community and their children and their future of their children. Now, that kind of idea is, in a nutshell, one of the activities that XBRL allows us to achieve. It's a standard that not only increases transparency, but allows us to advance economically over where we are today. That's one example. There's also risk and return taxonomies, moving beyond the idea of just financial and non-financial, but allowing us to track risk and return activities. If you think about investments in mutual funds, it's not really about the financials of the mutual fund. It's really about the risk and return attributes of the investments that the fund is making. Looking at other taxonomies that are not related to external reporting directly is the global ledger taxonomy. This taxonomy is a taxonomy designed to standardize how ERP systems or any type of ledger describes information. It can be very useful inside the enterprise to increasing transparency and enhancing business processes. I'll give you some examples of those processes in a minute. Additionally, we have a taxonomy for mortgage-backed securities. Think about the current financial crisis that we originated in the U.S. with the subprime financial crisis. In substance, mortgages are packaged in a portfolio similar to apples in a barrel, in which there's reasonable information on the barrel, but almost no information on the individual apples. And when a few of those apples start to go bad, then the entire barrel is a problem. And that, in substance, is where we had a problem in the U.S. capital markets with people inappropriately pricing those barrels and inappropriately insuring those barrels because they were unable to see actually what was inside in terms of the individual assets or mortgages. So now there is a mortgage-backed security taxonomy in collaboration between the XBRL community and the mortgage community. That's one example of an opportunity for increased transparency and process enhancement that the community can take advantage of. One of my questions, of course, is with the leadership here, what opportunities additionally do you see? A governance risk and compliance taxonomy is currently under development by OSIG. Again, focusing on the internal application of XBRL inside the enterprise, allowing us to more effectively manage governance, risk, and compliance activities across the enterprise, not just reporting to external parties. There's also a number of business intelligence and KPI taxonomies that are being developed by the marketplace. Recently, a project was completed in the technology sector in which SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, and Cisco came together with their 40 analysts to create a number of KPIs to be used by the companies internally, not for external reporting, but for internal use in order to improve overall corporate performance. So, what other sectors could benefit from that idea and from those taxonomies? The idea that companies might report those KPIs externally is a decision to be left to management. But to have those taxonomies and lower the cost of implementing those type of BI solutions is an opportunity that now exists and that we might expand upon. As we start to think about some of the process implications, data quality is an obvious one. You can see that with external reporting. Those concepts also relate to internal processes as well. How many times in companies has validation analysis been a consumer's problem when today, using XBRL, we can shift that burden to the producers, who are the individuals who actually have the answers to the data quality issues and the validation errors that may exist, as well as any analytical questions that consumers might have. Transparency internally, that's an opportunity for the XBRL Global Ledger to increase the ability of management to see across a wide range of proprietary silos. Think about your own business, how you treat the information in your different software applications. Most people think about their information in terms of where it's physically located, not what it is. It's in PeopleSoft, it's in Oracle, it's in SAP, it's in Hyperion, it's in Sage, it's in JD Edwards. We think about it in terms of what software application the information is stored. Now, contrast that to the internet, where you're able to access literally millions of stores seamlessly with simple tools because it's been standardized. That's the purpose of the XBRL Global Ledger, to give you that layer of standardization so that you can access and reuse the information across the enterprise, and you begin to think about it in terms of what the information is, not necessarily where it's stored. In doing so, that gives you some pretty significant benefits. If we look back to the external area, and something that you can obviously see here in Spain, is the collaboration across government entities to reduce the administrative burden on companies. Clearly an opportunity, one that you're realizing here in Spain, other countries around the world are as well, but another benefit that a standard provides. What we're also seeing is that companies are beginning to apply XBRL at the beginning of their reporting process rather than the end. In this example, I have two concepts of lowering the cost and time of reporting while enhancing controls. This exists in an area of reporting that I'll refer to as the last mile. It's not the consolidation process. It's not the ERP process. It's that manual set of processes that exist to assemble and review the report. It's sort of a pre-Henry Ford production process in which highly skilled craftsmen manually assemble the cars by hand, typically in Microsoft Office, Word, and Excel. That's how companies assemble the report. What we're seeing now, particularly in the U.S. with the SEC mandate in year 2, where companies are looking at providing over 3,000 elements per report where they're tagging their detailed note disclosures, that's requiring the companies to think about where in the process they actually apply the mapping. Is it after I've completed the report, or is it before the last mile? Companies that have done that, and roughly 150 of the Fortune 500 have done so, have realized significant cost and time reductions in their reporting process. Something in the range of minimum 25% cost reduction, 25% time reduction, as well as enhancing the control environment of that last mile, because they've been able to automate process steps that were previously manual. A few other process areas is the idea of consumer-driven reporting. You can obviously see that with external reports. That opportunity is available internally as well, in which business people can begin to collaborate and share information, not dictated by the software, but dictated by the individuals. This is an idea that's new, one that is in its very infancy, but where it's been implemented, it's drawn implementation in a very rapid sense. One organization had over 65,000 users of this idea within a 12-month period, something unheard of if you were trying to implement a new software application. Social analytics is the same concept in which people are able to collaborate on analytical models using the formula link base and to share those ideas freely, just like you share your music files using an iPod player possibly or other type of device. You're able to share those concepts seamlessly across software applications, focusing on the analytical concepts, not just the data. Last is one that's fairly interesting to me. It's called tax transaction optimization. I think with the global ledger, you can see how you could standardize ledger concepts, but it turns out that standardizing entity concepts or organizational structures is actually a very interesting part of the problem. If you can do that, which some companies now have done, in fact, some consultancies are providing this service to clients, is if you can standardize your organizational structure and create a taxonomy out here of that idea, you're able to take one transaction with one profile and run it through this entity structure to optimize its tax treatment versus another transaction with a different profile can be run through another entity structure to optimize its tax treatment. So this gives you the ability to basically realize in the tax area what has been long-term considered sort of the holy grail, real-time tax planning and optimization at the transaction level. The last thing I'll cover in terms of a new process area is something that's referred to as ABPD, Automated Business Process Discovery. This is something that Fujitsu discovered after they standardized all of their ERP systems using XBRL Global Ledger. Those systems began communicating with standardized messaging, which allowed them to observe those messages just like a helicopter might observe traffic patterns during rush hour. They used those messages as a proxy for where they had process efficiencies and inefficiencies, which gave them a very sustainable way to monitor areas for potential process improvement going forward. So my point here is that with this overall slide and this summary is that there are tremendous opportunities all along the supply chain for additional taxonomies and process enhancements. And I wanted to share some of those with you to encourage you to think about them as you move forward here in Spain. Now, given those opportunities, if I could go to the next slide, there are a number of opportunities for you to participate in the XBRL International Standards activity. So now that I've shown you some things that are possible, now I'd like to ask for your assistance in ensuring that they are possible long term. These are opportunities for you as an individual to participate in the standards process. What I get out of this personally is I learn a lot more about what's going on in other organizations around the world by participating in these activities. It's the same thing that our parents told us as children. The more we put into something, the more we'll get out of it. This is a laundry listing of the opportunities that are available at XBRL leadership levels, in the various working groups, and in market efforts. One I'd like to highlight for you here, and by the way, XBRL Spain is playing a leadership role in a number of these organizations and leadership opportunities. I'm just suggesting that given your track record and your experience, that you may want to consider more. As you know, if you want to be successful, you always ask the successful person to contribute because they're the ones that make things happen, and that's obviously XBRL Spain. One thing I'd like to mention and highlight on this slide is the International Financial Reporting Standards Taxonomy, IFRS. The ISB is going to be asking for market participation collaboration on a taxonomy extension project that should begin in the next 60 to 90 days. I highlight that because as you look forward to IFRS here in Spain and adoption across many government regulatory bodies and others, having a highly extensible and robust IFRS taxonomy may facilitate that work here in Spain as well. So it's sort of a vested interest idea on your behalf. The last thing I'd like to do is the first thing I started with, and that's to thank you for your efforts. If I look to the things that I'd like to thank you for on the last slide, it would be things like your curiosity, your ability to innovate, your persistence, your ability to learn, your development of case studies and collaborative outreach to others. I could certainly sense that last night at dinner with the XBRL Spain board. It wasn't a group of competitors. It was actually a group of friends, people who worked well together and who had very special feelings for one another. And that came across loud and clear, and it was a great experience for me personally, because it was exactly the kind of thing that I hope to see and love to see. But to thank you for your outreach to others, your proactive contributions to the community, for your technical developments which seem to flourish here in Spain and are very useful for other countries around the world, and specifically for your ability to realize the benefits that are enabled by standardization through its adoption in your organizations and your processes. So thanks again for your leadership, thanks for your collaboration, and for the community that you've developed here in Spain and are assisting in the development around the world. I appreciate your contribution and your assistance. Thank you.